Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Roald Dahl Retrospective, where we take a look back on Roald Dahl's adaptations based off of his books and shorts.
And for those of you who are surprised to see an episode of this, we're kind of surprised too, because we actually took a journey to Great Missenden. That is the place where Roald Dahl created some of his works, and also where his resting place currently is. And so we just thought we would go to visit there as tourists, but after going there, we pretty much had enough basically to do a podcast on this, so that's basically what we're doing right now.
Yeah, so we decided to do this for quite a while now. I mean, we've actually been planning on this for the past year or so when I was coming over to England for the second time to visit my wonderful sweetheart. And we decided that we were going to do that as either like the first thing or the last thing that we did on our trip to London. And we decided that due to the weather that permitted for us to go have a very nice beach day. So yes, we did have our second beach episode. And then, woo! And then we went to London and spent the remaining 2 days over there. And then finally, on our last day, when we were driving back to Manchester, we decided, let's stop by Great Missenden and let's go look at the Roald Dahl Museum. And we were there about 30 minutes early. So we decided to just walk around and see what was able to, pass our time. And the first thing we decided to do was we decided to go over to Roald Dahl's gravestone. All right, so we made it to Great Missenden. We just left London this morning, and we're going to be heading over to the Roald Dahl Memorial.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a really small little village, but it's beautiful.
I've heard there was going to be a Roald Dahl museum, and I thought maybe, tourist attractions or in the big massive London areas and things like that, and that's what I was expecting, and now all of a sudden here I am in a small little village that's way worlds away from us.
I agree.
And yeah, it's interesting.
It is very interesting.
Yeah, and you know what? It's pleasant. I feel like it's respectful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm glad I made it here.
I'm glad I made it here too. But yeah, but look at all these houses. All covered with trees and bushes and flowers.
Some of these houses, I bet, were probably built.
Well, this one is literally just called the Old House.
Yeah, but it was called. Well, that one was built in 1720, I think.
Oh wow, 1720.
1720 was on that sign. So some of these houses date back several centuries. Yeah, and I have to say that this cemetery was quite unusual for myself, because this is actually based on a hillside. So the actual gravesite itself isn't actually flat; it's actually kind of like curving downwards, and so it was quite an unusual sight for myself. But I guess you could say that Roald Dahl, was a pretty unusual guy. I guess you could say so. Maybe it was very fitting. But he's actually got a stone slab that's actually reaching from the bottom to the top of the grave, and it has his name on it. It also has it has a symbol on the top of it, and also apparently people were leaving actually pennies actually on top of his grave, because people wanted to see it being people taking care of the gravesite. So I guess they've been leaving donations over there as well, just so that the groundskeeper over there can continue putting flowers there and continue taking care of it. So but mind you, I reckon I don't know if the Roald Dahl family is still maintaining his resting place. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I'm not too sure either, but it was really nice for fans of Roald Dahl to actually put in a little trinket of appreciation at least. And I was the only one who put in American currency over there, just to show about how far I was willing to go just to visit the grave of one of my favorite children's authors.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that the church itself was really nice. We actually went over to a church that we saw when we were on our trip to Salisbury, and it was an abandoned church that has been hasn't had a service for who knows how long, and it was still intact because of donations. And unlike that church, the church that Roald Dahl was buried in is still active. We were actually we wanted to take a look around, but then there was actually people there having a meeting, and we decided not to disturb it.
Yeah, and because it was it's still a church that's still in use to this day.
Yes,
so
it is.
It still has parishioners and things like that. So we decided not to disturb them. So we just kind of went in, I peek through the door, and then after that, it's a very nice church, by the way.
It is a very nice church, yeah. And for those who are wondering, it is the parish of St. Paul and St. St. Peter. So yeah, all you have to do when you first enter in Great Missenden, they actually have courtesy to leave maps around so that if you're interested in looking around the village, you can be able to see all the major attractions that they have over there.
So, I mean, let's start with Great Missenden itself. It's a small little village that, has, lovely little houses, and you would not think in a million years that it would be host to, a museum of someone, as big and as inspiring and as, large as Roald Dahl. I mean, we went to the Charles Dickens Museum, for example, it's a big townhouse in London, and, you go through there, and, it is a massive, museum compared to, that's in the middle of London, so, it's, you expect to see something like this, probably in London, like the Roald Dahl Museum or something like that. But no, it is actually in Great Missenden. You have to travel quite significantly out to get there. And the one thing I will say, though, about the Roald Dahl Museum itself is that it's not just about the museum. This is about the actual village itself. Because when you first enter into Great Missenden, you realize that you're in Roald Dahl territory. All of his inspiration is everywhere. Whether it's let's first start off with the library first to start off with it, because the library itself is actually very important, because this is where in Roald Dahl's story that Matilda went to that library in order to basically to get her interest in books, while her mother went 10 miles down the road to go take the bingo. And so that in itself is very important.
Absolutely. So if you've ever read the book of Matilda, it would say about that she walked a long distance so that she can be able to go over to the library in Great Missenden, while her mom would travel about 10 miles in Aylesbury so she can play bingo. And we saw the actual library, which was the inspiration for Matilda herself. Unfortunately, the library was closed on the day that we were there, so we were not able to go inside the building itself.
That's so unfortunate. Funny enough, the museum itself is not open on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, and so the museum is open on the Thursdays and the Fridays, and I think it's on the weekends as well.
Yes.
But the museum itself, if you went on a Thursday, you couldn't if you went either on a weekday, basically you'd have to have a choice of whether you actually went into the library or actually went into the museum. So unfortunately not all are open at the same time, unless you're gonna go on the weekend, but then the weekend's gonna be busy, isn't it? So.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. But it was nice to see that it wasn't like a grand library like you would expect, but it was just a small library. Yet at the same time, that was where the character of Matilda was able to gain all of her knowledge, where she read so many books by Charles Dickens, by Ernest Hemingway, by John Steinbeck, and from so many other people. It was a small, quaint little library, and it makes a lot of sense considering that, Great Missenden itself was a small village. But it was really nice to see that inspiration. When Roald Dahl was writing the book Matilda, the library that Matilda used to go to when her mom played bingo is right here, the Great Missenden Library. So it was said in the book that Matilda used to walk all the way from Buckinghamshire over here to this library, and her mom would go all the way to Aylesbury, which is about 10 miles from here, so she can go out and play bingo. So, yeah, it's closed, unfortunately, so we weren't able to go inside, but essentially where Matilda got all of her intellect for all of her books and knowing about all classic literature came from this very library.
It's a great old piece of architecture as well. It's not what you would have thought of when you think of Roald Dahl. It's more, I guess, I think brutalist. I think was the style at the time.
I guess so.
I think, so you can see a lot of this architecture around about, so in Manchester you see quite a bit of it, but nowadays they're starting to pull some of it down. They're starting to replace it all with glass structures.
Oh, really?
So that's still a thing, in some areas, but things like this still stand the test of time.
They do.
It's a very interesting building.
It is a very interesting building.
Yeah, they just don't go in it.
Yeah. Another inspiration we were able to see during our walk was the petrol station that was the inspiration for Danny the Champion of the World.
Yeah, and by the way, it is still in the original form, but unfortunately, when we got there, apparently May of this year, somebody stole the tops of the gas pumps on there, and so if anyone has information on retrieving those, please could you let them know, and so they can basically they can restore the monument, because quite frankly, I think it's just disgraceful what's happening happened to that. And but mind you, we still got pictures of it anyway. It still looks like a grand sight. And but obviously that that vandalism, I think, is just uncalled for in my opinion. And just leave stuff alone.
Exactly.
It's
yeah.
a piece of history. Seriously.
Yeah, and they even had like a tongue in cheek joke about like this place hasn't been open since we stopped having like £1 per gallon on petrol, and you're not gonna get your you're not gonna be able to get cash from here. The guy who runs the station is out for lunch permanently or something like that.
Yeah, I think back in the day it probably was a gas station, but now I mean from what we can see, it looks like an office building now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if this was the inspiration where Roald Dahl got for Danny the Champion of the World, in which Danny and his father ran a garage / petrol station, then that's probably where it was in the beginning.
Yeah. And so we then finally, after we done all of that, we finally entered the Roald Dahl Museum. And, first, the thing that you get off when you first get in there, first of all, there's the gift shop that you can go and mingle around. But to be honest with you, I would say leave that till last. Obviously you'll get a chance to kind of purchase things after the But when you purchase the tickets, this is really interesting that they told us that the ticket that we currently have right now lasts 1 year. So if you buy the tickets within the 12 months, you can revisit the museum as many times as you want within that year.
Absolutely.
I think that's fantastic.
I think it is. And something that we're going to be talking about a little later is that the museum itself is not just for, people who are fans of Roald Dahl, but it's for people so that they can be able to gain the, inspiration and knowledge for people who want to do writing or anybody who wants to do anything creative.
Yeah. And so when we first walked in, the first thing that you are told about is obviously, the great mouse plot, and so you learn about that story. And also on top of that, you also get to see some very old photographs of Roald Dahl doing all sorts of things. I think the one intriguing thing, there was two intriguing photographs that I loved. The first one was of Roald Dahl and Ernest Hemingway. Obviously they walking along the side of each other. That was imagine if they collaborated at one point. That would have been very interesting.
That would have been really interesting. I mean, you have Roald Dahl with his eccentric creativity, and then you have Ernest Hemingway who basically has like a lot of social commentary because he went through war and all that kind of stuff. But so did Roald Dahl. So I'm sure it would have not been like his children's book inspiration. It probably would have been like pre James and the Giant Peach, or around the time in which he was doing things like You Only Live Twice, or even his anthology series. Which by the way, while we were just like hanging around throughout this week, we actually like caught a glimpse of like one of the episodes of Roald Dahl's Tales of the Unexpected, and it played all very similar to like Alfred Hitchcock Presents, where Roald Dahl is like sitting on his chair and he's introducing what the story is going to be about.
Yeah, we just came off by the chance when we were like watching TV, but that was not the Roald Dahl Museum, by the way.
Yeah, I know it's not in the Roald Dahl Museum, but I just thought it was kind of like an interesting kind of like foreshadowing of what we were going to be doing.
Yeah, so you get to see. By the way, one of the picture I thought was very fascinating was the one with when he was with Walt Disney.
Yeah, so that was when they were collaborating with the Gremlins book.
Yeah, I'm really surprised because given the fact that Walt Disney had a very interesting relationship with Roald Dahl. I mean, I'm really surprised that more Roald Dahl works never ended up under the Disney banner. That
would have been really interesting.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that after that, because that Walt Disney had when he had relationships with other people, somewhere down the line they would either become Disney shows or features or films or whatever.
Yeah.
But Roald Dahl is sort of kind of eluded Disney in some ways. Some other because the big Matilda movie was done by Barbara Wilson and Danny DeVito. I don't think that was done under the Disney banner.
It was not. It's
no.
It's
and
done
Fantastic Mr. Fox wasn't done under the Disney banner either.
It was Fox.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, obviously, technically now, I mean, you could say that they are under the Disney banner.
Technically, but only because it's owned by Fox.
But they weren't. You think that these were stories that Walt Disney may have attempted while he was alive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the only thing that we've had were obviously the 1996 adaptation of James and the Giant Peach, and obviously the 2016 adaptation of the BFG. But that happened decades after Roald Dahl's death.
Exactly. Yeah, and it wasn't exactly like Roald Dahl was going to go up to Walt Disney and say hey, you ever thought of doing a whimsical animated fiction of 36 hours? I don't think so. But seriously, the first room I thought was very good because it gives you an outline of what Roald Dahl was about, what was it inner thinking, things like that. The next room, which is the Soho room, that gives you an insight into his personal life a little bit. Like, his time as being a fighter pilot. The fact that at one point he was too tall, they all thought to be a fighter pilot, and he had to like fly with like the roof up. And at one point he nearly died, I guess you could say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and right before we go into more in details about the Soho room, we were looking at pictures of like Roald Dahl's childhood. About like he had a really close relationship with his mother because his father passed away at a very young age. More information about that, go listen to our podcast on Roald and Beatrix. But yeah, it showed off like he was very close with his mother. He had his siblings with him, and you get to see like pictures of him in his school uniform, and just like mentioned before about the tale of the dirty mouse, where they played a trick on the person who ran the candy shop because she was like really mean and nasty towards the boys, and that's where the inspiration of Miss Trunchbull came from. And also his love of chocolate, which would carry on into Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But yeah, going into the Soho room, this was talking about like when he was an RAF pilot during World War II. And there's actually a recording of his daughter recollecting on hearing about the time in which her dad was in the RAF and when his plane crashed and when he was severely injured. I mean, we even knew about all the stuff that he actually kept in his desk, which we'll get into in a minute. But I gotta imagine like all the things that he had to go through as an RAF pilot. Like 16 soldiers were trained under his group, and out of all of them, only 3 survived, including him. And he shot down 5 planes during his time in the RAF.
Yeah. I know one time that he was flying over Libya and he had to crash land in the desert, and I couldn't imagine being so severely injured. Like, he was blind effectively, and he didn't recover from his blindness until later on. And also like some of the injuries he got from that crash, like he carried on so like until the day of his death, effectively. And so like that was a scary experience to do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially with what we actually saw on his table around his writing room. But again, we'll get to that later. Another thing that was in that room was the original door of the Gypsy House. The Gypsy House was a place where he lived in, like around his early years of writing his books. And then he went over to the Caravan and then over to another place, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But he was able to do some really creative things during his years working on, various books. And we actually got to see the original door of that. And apparently it was painted the actual color that it was from in the originally, and I thought that was actually really fascinating. And then I believe that there were some other things that were like posted up where you saw the badges that he earned during World War II. He earned 4 of them.
Yeah, there were medals actually.
Yeah, medals. That's what I meant to say. Yeah, there were medals, and also you get to see like his helmet. And again, going into that discussion where his daughter was like looking at the helmet, and she was like, it reminded me of the time that my father was in the war and all those horrible things that he went through. So yeah, it's just really fascinating that you get to see his helmet that he wore as an RAF pilot.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the fact that he was, someone who went through the war, I think in itself is very fascinating in itself, because, like, you would think that would be something that would kind of rob you a little bit of your innocence, but, and don't get me wrong, like, Roald Dahl has gone to some dark places in his creative works, but at the same time, like, you can still see, like, some of the, the fact that, he became, an author of, children's books that created more, fanciful elements. I really thought that, he would have been, that would have changed his character a little bit, but funnily enough, it didn't.
Well, I mean, he already went through a lot of other stuff, like, his dad died at a very young age, his older sister died from appendicitis, and he hated going over to the school that he went to because he was away from his mom, and, he was miserable because of all the teachers who abused him, and the only time in which he was able to find some remote of happiness was when he was with his friends. They went to the candy shop, they would go out exploring into the woods, and he would just be, like, working on his creativity as a writer. And, obviously, like, even past the war, he went through a lot of struggles. His daughter died, from the measles. His only son was in a severe car accident. And so, and also, not to mention that, he had a really horrible divorce from his first wife, Patricia Neal. And then eventually, he had his relationship with Lissy Dahl, and then he got married to her. So yeah, he went through a lot of ups and downs.
Now, by the way, we're going to put a bit of a warning on this because we're going to just say that we met somebody who was in Great Missenden, and we're not going to name who this person is
Nope.
because we promised that. And but we met somebody who actually knew Roald Dahl in Great Missenden. Now, this person told us that Roald Dahl was difficult, but he was brilliant.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense considering of what kind of person Roald Dahl was. I mean, Roald Dahl is the kind of guy who is like really stickling and knowing exactly what he wants. We already talked about this ad nauseum with Charlie and with Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and with The Witches, and the fact that the BFG and Danny the Champion of the World were the only adaptations that he liked because they were sticking like ad nauseum, like verbatim close to the book. It makes a lot of sense that he was a really difficult person to work with. And yeah, this person was, basically saying that, yes, Roald Dahl was very difficult, but he was brilliant at the same time. So it makes a lot of sense with who his character was.
Yeah. So so continuing on with the museum. So Soho room. You finally you got the gypsy door in front of there. So you then go past that, and then you actually get to see like a recreation of the room within the gypsy house, and so you get to see everything. And by the way, on his table he keeps the piece of femur that was removed after the crash, and he keeps that on there. And apparently, according to the doctor, that's like the biggest piece of bone he's ever removed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm surprised actually he's managed to be able to keep it, because I remember the story of when Mick Foley lost his ear, and he was asking for it, and this was in Europe, and she just the woman didn't really understand English, the nurse didn't really understand English, so she just threw it in the trash. Oof. And that was and then just said something in in a different language, and then just moved away. So I'm quite surprised that that I heard that story, and then hear that somehow Roald Dahl was able to get it back from the doctor, like the piece of his femur that they had removed. That's crazy.
And apparently you can actually see the scarring of osteoarthritis in there. Another thing that he kept in his desk was shavings of his spine.
Yeah, I didn't know that either, actually, until you pointed that out to me.
Yeah, that's crazy. And there was some normal stuff in there. Like there was like a little model plane that was a reminder of his work in World War II, and there was also an aluminum roll ball of every candy wrapper he has ever eaten.
Yeah, and on top of that, there was also they even kept the original telephone from the original Gypsy House, including the wiring, which I thought, wow, the Roald Dahl, gave props to the Roald Dahl Museum. They went to every painful aspect to recreate the room that he was in, and I think that was incredible detail that they put into that, and I was just fascinated by just looking at it. I even took a panoramic of the whole thing, and I'm going to be watching, looking at that again from time to time and saying, oh wow, look at this amazing thing that they did.
Yeah, and of course there was some other stuff. There was pictures of his family, there was his glasses, there was note cards, there was his notebook with his pencil and pen. There was so many things in that room, and of course there's the chair, the iconic chair that was customized for him to stay comfortably, and it also even had various other things as well. But I'm looking at the picture right now, and it was modeled almost exactly how it was in the Gypsy Room, where he had his writing room. He was able to write all of his famous books.
They even kept the radiator as well, if you notice. That's in the picture. They even kept the original windows are in there too. That's all in there, and also just all the pictures and all of his memories and everything like that. That's all in there too.
Yep.
And also the chair. I mean, for those of you who don't understand the chair, so if you've ever watched Wes Anderson's Fantastic Mr. Fox, he has the living chair, and it has wheels on it, and also he customized the chair to have this kind of board that's on it. And if you notice that Fantastic Mr. Fox, when he's on there, he you notice that he does all his planning, all his drawing on that as well. And so they did that as a reference to the way that Roald Dahl creates his drawing. So if you've seen Mr. Fox on that chair, that's how Roald Dahl basically made all of his creations.
So here we are. This is the Roald Dahl Museum in Great Missenden. We're just looking at his time when he was in the RAF during World War II and his family life. And right here is the original door of the Gypsy House.
this is the hut.
This is the writing hut right here where he wrote some of his best books. This is the chair that he sat in. It was a specific chair. He customized it so that he can be able to remain comfortable while he would sit for who knows how long writing everything that he wanted to. And that's, if you see right there, that's the femur where it was removed during the war. And it's right there on that table. Imagine keeping your own femur just sitting on your table.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
That's insane. They even feature this chair, if you remember in Fantastic Mr. Fox, where Foxy was coming up with the ideas of break it down into Bogus, Buns, and Beans' house. Yeah. Oh, that's right. That's Willy Wonka's outfit from the 2005 film, right there. Oh man, I would give anything to have just a little bite of that chocolate right now.
It's funny now that the Johnny Depp version of Willy Wonka takes precedence over
The Gene Wilder version, yeah.
Which he obviously, he famously didn't like.
That's right, yeah, he didn't.
And that's the animated film.
Yeah, that's the animated film.
And this was the movie that won Roald Dahl back to the idea of bringing his creations back onto the screen.
I mean, can you blame him after seeing things such like Danny the Champion of the World and the 1976 James and the Giant Peach BBC special?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see that. That's been remembered.
Yeah, and speaking of Wes Anderson and Fantastic Mr. Fox, then the next room that we went over to was basically a showcase of all of the movie adaptations based off of his books.
Well, before we get to that, because the Fantastic Mr. Fox thing is not actually within, the next bit. That's actually within the story activity center.
Okay.
So that's for all the kids, everything. But mind you, I think we should actually focus on that because that's actually the iconic piece of the museum, in my opinion. That's what you've come to actually go see it. The Wes Anderson models are actually in this glass case, and they have Mr. Fox in his hole, and you've got Mrs. Fox next to it as well. Can you just see the amazing, we were talking about this in the Roald Dahl Retrospective, the amount of amazing, painful detail that they did to make you believe in these anthropomorphic foxes that in this somewhat real environments, and you can just seeing them up close now gives you a real appreciation for how painful it must have been to move all these characters around, keeping the detail on there as well, making sure you can see that the fur was moving around during the time that it was in. You can see how difficult it was to keep that. You couldn't exactly move it and then comb it back into place and everything like that. That must have been so difficult to do.
Oh yeah,
but
absolutely.
Just looking at the models up close and getting to be up and close with a part of I consider cinematic history. I think it's incredible.
I
to
do
look
too.
at that.
And we even saw in the back of the display that Wes Anderson went over to Great Missenden and he was able to visit Lissy Dahl and learn everything about Roald Dahl and about himself so that he can be able to craft it into Fantastic Mr. Fox. And even though that Fantastic Mr. Fox, only in the first third of the movie, it sticks to the book while everything else is just partially made up. I mean, mostly focusing on
he basically took creative license.
Yeah,
on,
he took a
on the
lot
property.
of creative licenses, even taking some cues from Danny the Champion of the World. But at the same time, we even said this, and even you guys said this on your votes, that Fantastic Mr. Fox was the best Roald Dahl adaptation. And we can see that from the creativity that Wes Anderson was able to craft with going over to Great Missenden, talking to Lissy Dahl, getting all the feedback, and look where it came from that.
Yeah.
Well, look at what we got here. We got figurines
I just want to say off the bat, this is incredible.
Yeah.
I wasn't. There's some things we weren't expecting to see. The Johnny Depp Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, Willy Wonka costume, but now we actually got the figures from the Wes Anderson Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, according to our listeners, this was their favorite adaptation.
Oh, of course. This, anyone who's seen Fantastic Mr. Fox in this form I think I would definitely say like this is probably the only time I actually managed to get a good performance out of Owen Wilson. It's that good.
Yeah, now Wes Anderson's going to be doing Henry Sugar, so that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, and you look at the design of them, like you really look at them and you think these are like anthropomorphic boxes. Like the design team of this, and Wes Anderson's creativity really shines in this situation. And to think that every little detail they had to move a certain bit and then obviously take the picture, move a certain bit and then take the picture. Anyone who's familiar with Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, obviously, they're seeing the whole process of that, will understand what this is all about. Like this is an incredible thing. Yeah, and one of the other attractions that's actually in the Roald Dahl Museum, which I pointed out, is the fact that out of both the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and the Johnny Depp version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory takes center stage in the Soho exhibit, and rightly so, because I would say that the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory version probably of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, funny enough, is probably the more faithful adaptation, I think, of that story.
It is.
Than the Willy Wonka version, and they do make reference to the Willy Wonka version. Don't get us wrong, but it's just a picture of Gene Wilder effectively, and but he doesn't make any mentions of that. The one thing I thought they would usually say, in that museum. By the way, I get this is a museum for all ages. I get all of that, but I would have thought that they would have included that. This is a version of Willy Wonka that Roald Dahl did not agree with. I'm really surprised they didn't include that in the museum.
I'm surprised too, and even with all the clips that we saw of all the adaptations, they did show Willy Wonka the Chocolate Factory, but they also showed things like Matilda. They showed Danny the Champion, Danny the Champion of the World, and unfortunately, a lot of the information on a lot of the movies were pretty vague.
Yeah, that's one thing I will say about it. I would have liked to have seen a bit more explanation of, how, here's the things that Roald Dahl had as his creations, and this is how he felt about them. I think if a lot of people had realized that, I think that, the Johnny Depp version is probably more what Roald Dahl thought, more than the Gene Wilder version. I think, that would have been some interesting context to put in there, I would have imagined.
Yes.
Have an explanation of why, because I'm sure people are going to be walking away from that museum, I would have probably imagined, and say that, the reason why the Johnny Depp version is getting more premise is because that's the newest movie and that's what the kids likely would have seen. Whereas, but I guarantee you that most young people have probably still seen the Gene Wilder version of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, especially after he died recently as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Even though that the movie is over 50 years old, and even though that it's not exactly as authentic to the book as, say, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, directed by Tim Burton, it's still the most beloved out of all of them.
I would say that, the Gene Wilder version of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and The Wizard of Oz are probably the two movies that probably kids have definitely seen.
Absolutely.
I would argue.
Yes, because it had that whimsical fantasy element that really drew you in. You had the colors, you had the iconic music, you had the characters, you had this really interesting storyline about a down on his luck kid who finds the golden ticket, is able to go over to this chocolate factory and meet up with this wonderful guy who's just out of his mind. I mean, it's something that a lot of people still gravitate to this day. It's transcended through many generations.
The one thing I will say though about the Gene Wilder version, I mean, they did keep the gates, so the gates are there in the front of the in the
yes,
Museum.
but that's not from the Gene Wilder version. That's from the Johnny Depp version.
Is it from the Johnny Depp version?
It is, because originally those gates that we saw when you first enter into the Roald Dahl Museum, they were going to actually. Well, here's the thing. The gates that we saw in the original Johnny Depp movie, they were going to use that, as their gates for the Roald Dahl Museum, but it was way too big. And so they decided, okay, we're going to make our own customized, gates that kind of looks a little bit like the gate that you have over there. But the ones that we was able to see is more closer in line with the gates that we saw in that version, which I thought was really interesting because you have all the colors of it. I mean, you have the iconic purple and yellow colors that matches up with Willy Wonka. And I think that we were able to get a picture of it, and we were able to see the comparisons between the two. It looks different, admittedly, but that's because, again, the gates that was used in the movie was way too big for the museum. So Warner Brothers made them a gate that was akin to what they would get for the museum.
Well, that's pretty cool, actually, when you think about it. Warner Brothers actually been really nice to the Roald Dahl Museum. Like,
Yeah, I guess
I
so.
don't think they'd be that charitable to now, unfortunately.
Considering about what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, they probably ask for them back.
Yes, we need to pay off the taxes.
Yeah. Anyway, that aside, so the fact that they put more emphasis on Charlie and the Chocolate Factory over Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, I think Roald Dahl himself probably would have liked that.
I agree.
I would imagine. And anyway, I'm just speculating here.
I mean, we kind of already speculated that when we talked about the 2005 version in our retrospective.
Yeah, the one thing I would have liked to have seen them do more, I think, of it is, like, don't get me wrong, they did make a mention to it, and that is the Cosgrove Hall version of the BFG.
Yes, like there was a mention.
By the way, actually, as far as I'm aware, there's no mention of the Disney BFG in the museum.
It's not there.
Wow, I mean, I'm really surprised, given that's the latest Roald Dahl creation.
It's Matilda, but even
Matilda, yeah,
Matilda the musical. We did see a lot of the posters for it.
We did, yeah, and I mean, like, there's a lot of references to Matilda in Great Missenden itself, let alone the Roald Dahl Museum.
Yeah, and even Matilda the musical is still playing in London.
It is actually, yeah. Actually, we walked past it when we were going to do it.
We did.
Yeah, we didn't watch it, unfortunately. We decided to watch Spitting Image, the musical.
It was actually a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. And by the way, we've sort of seen, because the one thing I think we would have loved to have done, if we had more time in London, was to compare, the actual musical itself to the movie and see which one we would have preferred. But I mean, unfortunately, we didn't have enough time and we didn't have enough money. So.
London is expensive.
London is expensive. That's one thing I warned you about when
yes, you warned me, and I felt it, and now my wallet is pretty much empty and crying.
Yeah, your wallet is on fire, and we're having to try and put it out.
Yes.
But anyway, that aside,
yeah,
I mean, Matilda, I think is, it does take precedence in the museum in Great Missenden because it's the one, and also on top of that as well. And by the way, this is just a massive coincidence to anybody who finds this out first. There is a cafe that is actually called Matilda's. Now, according to one of the people who works there, apparently it's not called Matilda's because it's named after, the story character. Apparently the person who previously owned it was originally named Matilda, and therefore, obviously, it was called Matilda's Cafe.
I thought it was her daughter was named Matilda.
I think probably, yeah, and so, I think that was the story.
That's what it was.
Yeah, but it's more of a family connection to someone who's called Matilda rather than actually being, named after the character, but, the current owner basically has stuck with it, and therefore, obviously, why wouldn't you? Because obviously it's Great Missenden. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and going into what you were saying before about, there wasn't a lot of information regarding about Roald Dahl's thoughts on Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. There was rarely any mention of the witches. That was another movie that was around when he was alive. And to
be honest with you, though, given the fact that, the first movie had the botched ending, as we know, which, not many people like, and the fact that the other movie is basically just, what's her name? Renata Ryder? Not Renata Ryder. Who played the Grand High Witch?
Are you talking about the old one or the new one?
The new one.
Oh, and Anne Hathaway.
Given the fact it was Anne Hathaway, with too many glasses of wine, I think, I don't know how appropriate, I think, by the way, that's just a joke. I don't know how appropriate, any of the witch movies, I think, would have been in there. By the way, I don't think the witches actually was, the big, because obviously we know what the big ones are. We know it's Fantastic Mr. Fox. We know it's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. We know it's Matilda. We know it's the BFG. I think those are the big four, I think, when it comes to Roald Dahl. And there was mention of the Great Mouse Plot, and there was mention of, other Roald Dahl works. But I don't think the witches are, at least in my opinion, it wasn't my favorite, Roald Dahl story.
It wasn't my favorite either. Yeah, I mean, you would expect James and the Giant Peach to also take a major presence in the museum because that was the first children's book he has ever written.
The one thing I'm noticing here, anything besides the BFG, but by the way, they make reference of the Cosgrove Hall BFG, but I've noticed that most of the Disney stuff, whether it's James and the Giant Peach and whether it's the BFG, or whether it's some of the other works that Roald Dahl has done in conjunction with Disney, they don't seem to take precedence in the Roald Dahl Museum at all.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, in the gift shop, we did see the DVDs of it, but that was pretty much it.
Yeah, they don't even make much reference into the museum. I don't know if that's a copyright thing or whether it's, something else. I don't know. Maybe they had a disagreement with Disney about some of the, the exhibits they probably would have done.
Which is kind of ironic considering that Roald Dahl had a close connection with Disney.
Let's be honest, if Disney did have, some, relics of, Roald Dahl, do you think they're going to give them to the Roald Dahl Museum? I guarantee they're at Disney World somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, you would have think that maybe very similar to, Fantastic Mr. Fox, we could have seen, the original stop motion of James and the Giant Peach, maybe a of James and the insects themselves and the peach. Like, that would have been really great to have as an addition to the
I
museum.
don't know, maybe Randy Newman's getting them off. I don't know. But, I mean, not much mention of James and the Giant Peach in this. And, I mean, who knows? Maybe they might change it all around at some point. Maybe they might say, oh, hey, if James and the Giant Peach becomes a thing again, maybe they probably will put exhibits in the museum. So, who knows at this point? But the one thing I will say to everybody is that just like, the village of Great Missenden itself, it is a very small museum.
It is very small. We got like past it within like the 30 minutes.
Yeah, and and I had to. The only reason it ended up being longer is because I took a bathroom break. So like I took a bathroom break. I then came back out. We did like we did like the second half of the museum, and then that was it.
Yeah. And then there was also some other stuff that we were able to see, which again, this is mostly for the children, and this is a thing that was a major thing for this museum and for Great Missenden itself. It's
by the way, one other thing I want to mention actually about the school children going there. There's somebody there, and I was listening in. She knows her stuff about Roald Dahl, and it was a shame that we didn't get time to do this. But one thing we really were interested to see about was the fact that we still have this mystery over the 1972 version of James and the Giant Peach, and the person that was there, I would have been very interested to actually ask about her. Like, does she know about the 1972 version, or whether Roald Dahl even approved of it? Given the fact that what was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? That was 1970.
That was 1971.
That was 1971. So this version came a year after.
Well, technically, the BBC version is 1976.
1976. Sorry, I do apologize.
It came out 5 years later.
So I was interested to see if maybe Willy Wonka probably had signed the dotted line by the time that was done, and had only seen Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and then disagreed with doing any more. So maybe that was the last thing before he decided to agree anything else. I don't know.
I mean, that's a good question.
Again, these are questions we would like to have asked, but she's obviously got school children around her, and we didn't want to bother her.
Yeah, she was around the area where the school children would be for their field trips, and she was talking about this is the chair that Roald Dahl sat in, and where he came up with all of his classic books, and the museum is not just like, oh, this is supposed to be like basically like a reflection on Roald Dahl's life, but it's also for the children where they get to create their own stuff. There's actually like sections of the museum where you can draw, where you can do stop motion, where you can write. They want this to be a major center point for creativity for children.
I mean, in regards to one thing I just remember now, in the BFG, they actually have an exhibit where you can you can record your dream in there, and they would read the dream back to you.
Oh, that's right.
So yeah, there was that exhibit. So I mean, the BFG does play a bit of a role in the museum, which I'm really happy to actually see, because the BFG is like one of my favorite stories. Mm-hmm. So. I mean, also there's the Matilda statue outside, so if you get a chance of that, I mean, it has got some battle damage on it, I will admit, but because obviously the kids have been playing on it and everything like that, so it's still an impressive statue regardless of that. So I
do agree, and the fact that we were able to take a picture right in front of it was also like a showcase that Matilda is just as a big of an icon for Roald Dahl books as, say, James Trotter or even Charlie Bucket or Willy Wonka. Speaking of which, we even actually, one of the first things that we actually saw when we were entering the museum is that you get to measure yourself on how tall you are compared to Roald Dahl and every character written in a Roald Dahl book. It's like, okay, if you stand right here, are you as tall as, say, an Oompa Loompa, or you're going to be as tall as the BFG? And for me, I was as tall as an actual Wonka, whatever that means.
I'm probably as tall as Mrs. Twit, apparently, so that's how tall I am. But, one thing I noticed is that they mentioned that the BFG is as tall as a giraffe, which I'm like, now don't get me wrong, like in different incarnations of the BFG, obviously like his measurements have never been like really well known. I mean, like in Cosmic Fall, he's like 2 stories tall, pretty much, like, but then in like the book version he's a bit smaller than that, and I think then in the Disney version he's actually way taller than that. Apparently.
Much taller than that.
Yeah, like he's otherworldly about effectively when you see him in that movie, compared to everybody else. But I mean, in regards to how tall we are in regards to Roald Dahl, we're not taller than him.
No. He is 6'5". Yeah, he was a tall guy, and considering that his femur, when they were able to remove it, and they said that was the biggest femur that they've ever removed, it's like, yeah, that just goes. It's like, what would we compare it to? Like the size of like a baseball or something.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I'm just, so I think, I mean, here's the thing about this, though, is like, if you're gonna come just for the museum, I mean, you're only coming for, like, probably 1/10 of, like, what you want to see when you go to Great Missenden, because, you go through the museum, you then come out, and then, on top of that, you can just go around the village and see different things. And by the way, this person that who knew Roald Dahl actually gave us some points about where the Gypsy House actually was, and and would you believe it, everybody, we actually saw the Gypsy House.
We did.
Yeah, and by the way, we want to give privacy to everybody, because we're gonna get one thing I'm a bit fearful is the way we do this podcast, and like tourists are gonna come flooding into Great Missenden, like trying to find stuff and everything like that. We we want to respect people's privacy while doing this, but so we saw the house, and we have to say that it's still in keeping for what we remember from the Gypsy House, from what we can see.
Yep.
And also right now it's currently going through some renovations at the moment, from what we can see.
Yeah. So we didn't see outside of that. So we just went on to look at other stuff.
By the way, if you're asking if we spoke to like any long lost relatives of like Roald Dahl, we haven't done anything
None
like
of that stuff.
Yeah. So like we were literally tourists, just coming here just to kind of like see things, and then just do some fun things there, and just have a look around the area, and just kind of get an idea of what was going through Roald Dahl's mind when he was like what inspired him to basically make all these creations that we all know and say now. Like we were just there just to kind of see where Roald Dahl had walked, and I have to say going around through this wonderful place of Great Missenden, all the wonderful, but everyone there says hello to you.
Yes,
by
they
the
do.
way. Like they are the most friendliest souls. Like I've not had that since I went to the American South and went to some of the smaller places where everyone says hello and goodbye and things like that. Very very respectful, wonderful people. And I have to say that the people of Great Missenden, they are the most wonderful souls I've ever met.
I agree.
They really are terrific people. So I want to say a big thank you. If you're in Great Missenden, by the way, and you're listening to the podcast, shout out to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
We love you. So great things with that. So continuing on with our journey, so we walked around the village, and we also saw the Great Missenden Abbey as well. And so that's now no longer an abbey anymore. It's actually a hotel and actually a conference center as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the staff there were very nice. They allowed us to walk around and see like all the things there, and also they allowed us to see like the big massive garden that's there too. And my goodness, at one point I was nearly thinking, I really wish that while we were in London we actually stayed in Great Missenden rather than staying in where we were, but then we saw the prices of like what it is to stay for one night, and it was like no thank you.
Yeah.
But and by the way, if you can afford staying over at Missenden Abbey, we do agree it's a really nice, wonderful place.
It is.
And so we do give a shout out to everybody there to go see that if you can afford to do so. So then, as we're looking at all of that, seeing the wonderful venue, and we just had a nice walk around. By the way, like the benches around the area are actually, I think they are named after like words actually within Roald Dahl's book. So like,
yes,
so like that was a pretty cute little thing to do.
Yeah, like fantabulous and various other words where people who are just sitting on benches right outside can be able to still feel the influence of Roald Dahl.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another thing that we saw when we were walking around was Whitehead Lane, which was this beautiful nature walkway where, Roald Dahl was able to get so many inspirations for a lot of his books, especially Danny the Champion of the World, where Danny describes about like being outside the gypsy caravan and smelling the grass in the air and being able to take it all in, or even with Fantastic Mr. Fox, in which he's outside and he's able to just like look past what the countryside is and being able to just like take it all in. Any mentions of the countryside were inspired more or less from just those specific places in Great Missenden. Other places that we unfortunately were not able to make over to because we were running out of time were the train station that Roald Dahl would like travel to and from, and the post office where he would get like 4,000 or 5,000 letters a week from children. We were not able to go to those places, but we pretty much walked around a good part of Great Missenden and got the idea.
I mean, we nailed the main spots effectively.
We did.
Yeah, and so, by the way, if you go out there and you travel by car, I mean, parking's very cheap as well. Like for 4 hours, it's only like £2.40, pretty much. So like, that's a bargain effectively. So it's not like in London where you're paying like a ton of money just to park your car, or like you have to pay congestion charge or anything like that. So like a Great Missenden is a good place to visit, and they do have places that you can stay. Actually, there's funny enough, there were people that were like coming in and coming in with like overnight bags and things like that. Like people were staying there.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. It's like it's a great place because where there's also like areas around the countryside where you can walk and stuff like that. So like, and also there's viewpoints as well where you can just see like out into the countryside and stuff. And just looking at all of that, like it's a place where your mind can just open up. It doesn't surprise me that Roald Dahl wrote several books in that place. It really doesn't.
Yeah, from 1953 or 4 up until his death, he wrote some of his most iconic books there in that specific little town, and he was able to get all the inspiration from that. And you can see why. The town is very quaint, it's very quiet, and there's lots of greenery. The people are very friendly, and you could see that he was able to just jot down any ideas that he had and putting it into his works. And even with his own garden, at his home, he was able to get things for SEO Trot, and even when he went out hunting, he got ideas from both Danny the Champion of the World and Fantastic Mr. Fox, the library for Matilda, the petrol station for Danny the Champion of the World, all of that stuff. Like, he was able to get like little snippets of his own personal life and a combination of where he lived into his works. Very similar to Charles Dickens when we were at the Charles Dickens Museum, where his experiences in London were able to craft some of his books like Oliver Twist and Nicholas Nickleby, David Copperfield, A Christmas Carol. Like the descriptions especially that were prominent in that museum was the effects of the pollution in the air at London during that time period. So that was a prevalent thing, while Roald Dahl's prevalent thing on his books was definitely like the quiet nature and all the all the trees and the grass and all the things that he was able to like drink in while he was at the countryside, where he was able to write some of his best books. And when you visit Great Missenden, you can definitely tell that a lot of this stuff, pretty much was like from the pages to like experience. And I think that that's a great thing that if you want to be able to experience a true Roald Dahl experience, you have to go to Great Missenden.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, like, that was pretty much our journey to Great Missenden, pretty much. And it's a lovely little village. It's got a lovely little museum in it, and there are plenty of places that you can go and visit. You can get it done during a day. Definitely.
Absolutely, yeah. You can get it done during a day, and you'll be able to accomplish so much. You'll be able to see so many attractions, and also you'll be able to, eat at Matilda's cafe if you want to.
And we recommend as well, like, the burgers there were delicious, and they do these lovely Oreo milkshakes as well, which we had. And if I had the choice to go back regularly, I would.
I would too. It was really nice, and also the servers were really nice there too.
Yeah, they were brilliant. Everyone there was nice.
Absolutely.
It's funny because for a place that probably has been a site for let's be honest, Roald Dahl brings in quite a lot of tourists there. Definitely brings in a lot of school children because it is an educational place as well. So we ask people around, like saying how many school children do you see? They say loads of school kids going there to because it's an educational museum and everything like that. And they saw us. They must get loads of tourists to come in, but they treat everyone so nicely.
They do
over there, and we highly recommend. Is not just because we're fans of Roald Dahl, but because just as a place that you can go and you just get treated really nicely.
Yeah, and the last thing that we did right before we left the museum was we went to the gift shop, and we actually got T-shirts for Roald Dahl quotes and all that kind of stuff because they were 50% off. And so I have a Willy Wonka golden ticket T-shirt.
Because I've got a golden ticket. No, I shouldn't really sing that song really, but yeah. And my shirt. So you want to read to everyone?
Yes, his shirt says, "Make sure everything you do is so completely crazy, it's unbelievable."
I'm wearing this to work. Oh wow, but. Yeah, so we're very happy that we went. We really are. And so if you get a chance to go over there yourself, then just say good morning, good afternoon to everybody, and just be as friendly as possible, and go visit the museum, go visit the cafe over there, and just have a really wonderful and whimsical time.
Absolutely. And so that is it for our episode of the Roald Dahl Retrospective. I know it's a little bit unorthodox considering that we weren't talking about a movie, but this is like literally the closest thing to Roald Dahl's life and experience that we've ever had on this show, and we were so thrilled to be a part of it. So, yeah, we don't know what the next Roald Dahl movie is going to be and when it's going to be coming out, but whatever it's going to be, we hope that you'll stay tuned.
Yeah, well, I believe, don't we have like Wonka, coming out?
Oh, that's
down the line?
right. Yes, we have two movies. Now that I just remember, two
Yeah.
movies are coming out this year. It's Wonka and The Wonderful World of Henry Sugar. So yeah, Wonka's definitely going to be the big one, obviously, because it's a major Hollywood production, and Timothy Chalamet is going to be Willy Wonka, and it's a prequel story about how Willy Wonka opened up his chocolate factory. We all know that every time that anything Charlie and the Chocolate Factory related comes out, with the exception of the Tom and Jerry version, it's going to make a lot of money. But we've seen in the past that Roald Dahl adaptations don't make any money at all. They underperform badly at the box office. But who knows? Maybe this one will be the one to get people's eyeballs glued in. And then, of course, there's The Wonderful World of Henry Sugar, which is going to have Benedict Cumberbatch as Henry Sugar, and it's going to be written and directed by Wes Anderson.
I mean, sure. I mean, obviously, I know Fantastic Mr. Fox didn't perform as well as they would hope to do, but I hopefully Henry Sugar will obviously give it. I mean, even then, if it doesn't perform well, it should be. You got Wes Anderson, you got Benedict Cumberbatch. I mean, you got some really creative people involved in this. At least it should be good.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. And that's all we know for now. I know that there was some other stuff with Netflix, but again, due to a lot of the stuff that's happening in Netflix recently, we still haven't heard anything about like the Twits or the Taika Waititi's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Oompa Loompa animated series, so that's still up in the air for now. But until then, we hope to see you around soon, and take care.
Bye-bye.